After finally making my way through all of From, I, like everybody else, have a whole lot of questions. And with a show like this that introduces questions upon questions upon questions with so far only a few answers, it can be hard to keep track of everything that's going on. So immediately after finishing the final episode, I went right to the question wall and began writing everything down. Though my girlfriend didn't really like me drawing on our walls too much, so instead I had to use a whiteboard. These are all just the ones off the top of my head, so I imagine I missed a few, or even quite a few, so who knows, maybe this video will get some kind of part 2 eventually. Now, I could go online, look at a compiled list of all the questions we don't have answers to, look up all the fan theories regarding each one, but I'm sure if you're watching this video, then you've probably already done all that. I haven't looked online at any popular fan theories, I haven't done any sort of additional research, so maybe a lot of these are popular questions with popular fan theories, but who knows, maybe some of them are unique and things that not everybody is asking about. Full spoiler warning ahead for the first 3 seasons. Now let's jump right into all the unanswered questions of From. So I'm going to start with some of the broader questions and theories before heading into the smaller ones, starting with number 1. Who made the talismans, and how did they really work? The talismans are quite honestly one of the first questions presented in the show. In the opening scene, we see everybody from the town touching these strange rocks by the door, and we're wondering what they're for. We learn pretty quickly that the talismans keep the monsters from coming into the house, but how? What about this symbol makes these creatures unable to come inside? And why does it only work if you're inside of an enclosed space? Why wouldn't wearing one around your neck work the same way? We obviously learn that Boyd is the one who found the talismans in the aptly named Talisman Cave, but that kind of just makes for more questions. Who put them here? And of course, who designed them? So my running theory is that someone who's been reincarnated, whether that be Jade or Tabitha or somebody else entirely, must have been the ones to make these talismans. Perhaps Jade's visions of this symbol have something to do with that, maybe somebody else or a previous version of Jade had this symbol everywhere, and when they put it on this rock, it ended up keeping the monsters away. And if so, what would happen if this symbol was put on a rock or something else? But again, more on this in a little bit. Personally, I would love to see the first night that they used the talismans. How did Boyd convince everybody it was going to be okay? Did they all stay in one house? How did they know that only one talisman was enough? Were some people hesitant and opted to hide instead? I think there's a lot of opportunity there for a flashback sequence that could come with some answers for the talismans. We see point A and then we see point Z of everybody using the talismans, but what happened between that time? Next up, what is this town, and how long has it been here? We got a few sniffs of an answer at this question in the season 3 finale, with the townspeople sacrificing the children in order to gain immortality, but when was this? The town itself looks like it could have been around from like the 50s, and some of the outfits that the monsters wear range from a variety of different times, so when did this initial sacrifice happen? If I recall correctly, the furthest back we see time mentioned is 1864, which was during the Civil War. So if I were to take a guess, I'd say that this is when the sacrifice of the children happened, and this is when the town as we know it was created. But this opens a whole other avenue of questions, a trend you'll notice when it comes to this list and this show in general. Where did all these buildings come from? Did somebody make the diner and the updated houses? Did a truck full of supplies going to build a diner / motel come into town and then they just decided to build it there? I doubt that's the case, so where did these buildings actually come from? Or is the Civil War time just some sort of red herring? Is this some kind of government experiment? Some kind of dimensional pocket? Aliens? The Dharma Initiative? Some witch's spell with the Salvatore brothers and Catherine? What I'm picturing when it comes to this is something more along the lines of something from Alan Wake, where different creations or places can come in and out of this place depending on the light and dark, which is actually something we've already seen before. Does light and dark unlock different areas and places? Is this how they got there in the first place? if people can be teleported or transported into this place, then why not buildings or structures? I think it would be really cool for a new house or something to just appear in the town overnight, perhaps even the motel that's mysteriously just missing. This would cause quite the stir in town, and people would be very cautious of it because it's something that's never happened to anybody in the town, except for maybe Victor, but who knows? This could bring the question of where does all this stuff come from to the forefront of everybody's mind, and could maybe possibly eventually lead to some sort of answer. Third question. What is with Jade's visions? While part of this question has been answered, we still don't have the full scope of the answer. Jade is a reincarnation of a past person, Christopher, the guy with the dummy. This makes sense as to why he could see Jasper and even other strange things like the Civil War soldier, because he's reincarnated from all the people of the past. But we still don't entirely know what this symbol means. He saw the symbol in the roots of the tree that the children poured their hopes and dreams into, but it's also on the cave. It's what Christopher started drawing, so what does it actually mean? I think whatever this symbol is probably going to be like the key to everything. Whether it's the key to everybody escaping, the key to killing these immortal creatures once and for all, or unlocking the secrets of the past, this symbol has to mean something. With the introduction to the man in yellow, this symbol might be some sort of way to keep him at bay, maybe trap him or the creatures like a devil's trap from Supernatural. Fourth question, what are the creatures? Once again, we sorta got an answer here in the finale. They're immortal beings, but what does that really mean? They aren't human, even though they have the structure of human beings, and that's because at one point they were, but now they're clearly not. So we have point A, which is these people sacrificing children to become immortal, and then we have point Z, which is they only come out at night and they hunt people. But what are points B to Y? How did they actually become monsters? Why do they only come out at night? And also, what do they actually do to the humans? Forgive me if I missed it, but I don't think that they eat these people, they just tear them apart. But why? Is this the price of being immortal? That they can only continue living if they kill other people? Are they filling some sort of quota to the man in yellow or something else entirely? I'd like to think that these things, whatever they are humans that are basically trapped inside of a different body. Kind of like how in The Last of Us or 28 Days Later, those things just don't have any control over their motor functions. Not to say that if there were people trapped inside that they deserve any sort of redemption, because what got them here in the first place was sacrificing children, but I imagine the man in yellow or somebody else promised them immortality, so they followed through with getting it, but there were terms in the agreement that they didn't read, and they became a hollowed shell of who they once were. It's like they got a wish granted for them by a genie, but the genie completely warped and twisted the wish. I'm usually not a huge fan of flashback episodes, but I actually think a flashback episode is warranted to see how all of this happened. And I also think there's at least a chance we'll get one. Julie already story walked so far into the past to the night that the children were sacrificed, so perhaps in season 4 she'll go so far back and actually uncover these answers, or any other number of answers that are in the past. Also, more on story walkers in a little bit. What is with the seizures? One of the things that popped out to me pretty early on was Boyd talking about how this place affects people physically. Boyd himself is starting to get Parkinson's, or at least some version of it, which isn't supposed to be genetic, or it's very rare if it is, yet he has it, and that always stuck out as strange to me. But what also stuck out as strange to me was how many people have had seizures. We've seen 4 characters have seizure, if I remember correctly, and that's Sarah, Ethan, Julie, and Elchin. Sarah and Elchin both have something in common when it comes to the seizures, and that's how they were both led astray by the creatures and manipulated into doing something with the promise that everybody will be able to leave. So at first I was thinking that people with seizures must be easily susceptible to the creatures, but that doesn't explain Julie and Ethan. Ethan had a seizure in, I believe, the second episode of the show, where he started talking about his stories and we could see Victor drawing, but Jim said that Ethan has no history of seizures whatsoever. Could it just be the trauma of his wound? Sure, it could, but it still seems strange to me considering Ethan was then able to see the boy in white. Julie had a seizure towards the end of season 3, and then all of a sudden she becomes a story walker. So what I'm thinking is once you have a seizure, you become more in tune to the more magical properties that this place possesses. I also think that the seizures affect each person differently, which is why 2 of these people were easily taken advantage of, and 2 of these people gained special sight or powers afterwards. I'm also going to go out on a limb here and say that Victor has at some point also had a seizure, since he's able to see the boy in white. And speaking of him, who is the boy in white? The boy in white is also one of the bigger mysteries in the show. I think at this point it's easy to say that he's actually there to help people in a way, because all we've ever seen him do at this point is point people in the right direction or offer some sort of guidance, but who is he really? Is he a previous resident? Is he some sort of culmination of all the children? Another thing that they put all their hopes and dreams into creating? I'm gonna make a pretty bold theory here that's pretty linked to my last theory, but I think that the boy in white is actually the dog that people see around, but only people who have had seizures can see the dog's true form, the boy in white. The dog appears to Boyd as a dog, but every time he follows it, it leads him to safety, or at least someplace that he recognizes. Ethan, Sarah, and Victor can all see the boy in white, and that's because they've all had seizures, or at least in Victor's case, I'm guessing that at some point he had a seizure. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Victor has seen both the dog and the boy in white, and in fact, in Season 1, Episode 4, he sees both of them at the same time. Now, I hear what you're saying, and allow me to up the ante. Victor isn't a very reliable character when it comes to point of view. Throughout the series, we've seen him recall different events from his past many different times until he sees the right version. Like with Eloise in the bunker, and Christopher talking with Jasper, but it was actually the boy in white. So I think in this scene right here, Victor had a seizure, and he's just recalling the memory differently because the dog runs toward the boy in white and heads off, which could very well be his memory being fuzzy of the two things merging together. That's my theory on the boy in white and the dog, but there's also other dogs, like when Jim and Tabitha are looking for Ethan in the woods. I rewatched this scene, and it almost seems like the main dog, that I think is the boy in white, is barking past Jim and Tabitha towards the other dog. And interestingly enough, this whole scene is from the perspective of Jim and Tabitha, not Victor and Ethan, because if it were, I think that they would see something else entirely. Perhaps the other dog or dogs are other entities, maybe things that have been around the entire time but have been chained up, waiting to be released. Maybe something like the man in yellow. I remember seeing a lot of stuff about this guy before I started watching the show, so I was waiting for the infamous man in yellow to make an appearance to the point that I actually forgot about him until he appeared on screen. And needless to say, I can see why there's a big commotion surrounding this guy. He kills Jim, lets him know that he was the one who contacted him over the radio, and future Julie seems to know who he is and be terrified of him. So is he the final big bad guy? Was he unleashed either from his dog form or some other sort of captivity through Jade's song? Is he the person who gave the monsters their immortality through the sacrifice of the children? Personally, I think the answer is yes, he is the final bad guy. He is the one that gave immortality to the monsters. I think he was unleashed through Jade's song, or else him saying,
"That Jade sure can play."
Wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense, and he's gonna cause some havoc among the community. I can already picture a scene where he goes up to Colony House at night or something, opens up the door, Donna confronts him and says something about how the talisman can keep him out, only for him to walk right in and toss the talisman on the ground. Maybe not, but that would definitely separate him from everything else we've seen so far. I'm also going to make the bold prediction that it's going to be up to Julie to story walk all over the place and find a place to stop him. Maybe this could lead to her eventually saving Jim, or maybe Jim is the sacrifice needed in order to stop him once and for all, and Julie will have to come to realize that. But who knows, maybe this guy is just the right-hand man to whatever is actually in charge. And also, I'm going to call it right now, Victor is the one who's going to take down the man in yellow. I don't really know where else to fit that in, so yeah, that's my theory. How does electricity work? Bringing it back down a little bit, let's talk about electricity. This was a big component of the plot in Season 1, only for us to get the answer of where the electricity is coming from, which is nowhere, and then never speaking about it again. It all just flows downward, but the wires aren't attached to anything, so is this magic? I realize this is probably a lot lower on the totem pole than a lot of other questions, but it still has to have an answer. And magic or something along those lines might very well be an answer, but magic is always kind of just a cop-out answer. How can brooms fly? Well, it's just magic. How can you teleport from one area to another? Magic. Why is the town looped? Magic. It's sort of a cover-all answer in order to not really explain anything whatsoever, so I think the answer should be something different here. Personally, I think the actual answer here lies somewhere in the light and dark equation that I brought up earlier when it comes to the town. I think all the electricity of the houses and the diner was brought with however the houses got here. So whatever was inside can still work, nothing else can be added to it, and who knows, maybe the man in yellow allows them to feel this sense of security with the light just to continue toying around with them. What is with the totems and the village? Perhaps one of the bigger mysteries introduced in Season 3 was everything surrounding the village that Jim and Kenny found. For one, the village is surrounded by these strange totems or voodoo doll looking things. They remark on how creepy they are. Kenny even suggests that they might work the same way that the talismans do, but we don't get any other sort of explanation. So the real question is, what is this village here for? What do the totems do exactly? Why are all the plants around the lake surviving and thriving with seemingly no one around? And of course, what are the bumps in the night when our characters are staying there? I think that there are a few different things that the totems do. Kenny could be right and they ward off any evil things to the village, but because that's exactly what he suggests means that's probably not what it is. I think these totems could enhance this area, specifically in regards to the food growing and what seemed like not so great conditions. Maybe these enhancements also mean that the monsters and such can't get in, but then what was going bump in the night? This could be any number of things: another monster, a giant spider, Julie or some other story walker, even the regular monsters, but I want to suggest something, actually, someone else. This kind of ties into another theory, so let's go over that first. Is Eloise alive? So we learn that Victor and his mother were not alone in this town, and he actually had a sister as well named Eloise. She left the bunker to go chasing after her mom, and Victor never saw her again. Pretty easy to assume that she died along with everybody else in the town, right? Well, that's exactly what I thought up until the last few episodes of Season 3. Victor takes his dad to where he buried his mom and also Eloise. He seems very certain that this was where he buried his mom, but he said that Eloise was all mangled and he could only find bits and pieces of her, so it could not have been her. But that's not where the theory ends. Victor also mentions playing hide and seek with Eloise and how she was so good that he was never able to find her. I think this directly correlates to him not being able to find her afterwards and any of these years later. So the next obvious question is, where is she? Has she really been hiding all these years from Victor and the others? Well, yes and no. The theory, yet again, goes deeper. We learn that Tabitha is Victor's mother Miranda reincarnated. This makes a lot of sense with how Tabitha is very motherly towards Victor, and so if you simply follow this trend, maybe not all of these people are reincarnated versions, but this makes Henry a lot like Jim, Victor a lot like Ethan, and Eloise a lot like Julie. And what did we learn about Julie in the tail end of this season? She's a story walker, and I believe Eloise, wherever she is is also a story walker. This is why Victor was never able to find her when they played hide and seek, perhaps because she literally was somewhere else. So I think that yes, Eloise is alive, and she's a story walker, just like Julie is, and perhaps when she pops up next, she'll even act as some sort of mentor to Julie and teach her how to control her story walking ability. So how does this tie into the last theory about the village? Well, I think that this is probably where Eloise has been staying for a long time. Whatever she learned about the past probably made her build these totems, or even perhaps the talismans themselves. Maybe there's even a few different reincarnated story walkers staying in this village or something along those lines, and she's the one who planted all these crops in different times, so that whoever comes across them at any time, they'll be fresh. I also think it was probably Eloise walking around at night, not some great giant spider or any sort of monster. Who else is reincarnated? Speaking of reincarnated people, let's open up this can of worms. Perhaps the biggest answer of the show so far was this revelation of people from the town being reincarnated, but I don't believe that this is the case for each and every person. I'm sure there are quite a few people in the town right now that aren't reincarnated people, they're just first versions of incredibly unlucky people. As for the people that are reincarnated, there's of course Tabitha and Jade, but let's talk about everybody's favorite Officer Friendly. No, not Rick Grimes, but Boyd himself, who I believe is the reincarnated version of Martin. Now, we know very little about Martin, but we know that he was a Marine, that he was once in the town, and that he knows about far greater threats than just the creatures in the town. So how does any of this make him the reincarnated Boyd? Well, there's of course the obvious military connection, but I want to bring up what Boyd said in the Season 2 finale. Right after he escapes from destroying the ballerina music box, he yells at this place, saying that it can't break him. The monsters even remind him of this when they kill Tian Chen in front of him, forcing him to watch. The monsters also have never seemed too preoccupied with trying to kill Boyd. Every opportunity they have to kill him, quite easily I would add, they never do. This is because I don't think they're trying to kill Boyd. I think they're trying to break Boyd for eternity, the same way that they're breaking Martin. I believe Martin was a previous version of a leader for the people in town, and the worst torture the creatures can give to him is to keep him alive to see all of his people die. This is why Martin asks to be killed. It's truly the greatest kindness Boyd could offer him. Martin even asks about Boyd's wife Abby and wonders if she was right. It's still incredibly strange that Martin would know who Abby is, but what if he had his own Abby, his own significant other that he was forced to kill because they completely lost it? Or did they? I think all of this could make sense with a bit more information. Hopefully we'll get that in Season 4. There's also this person who came into town with the exact same name as somebody who Boyd had to kill when he was in the military. Coincidence? Reincarnation? Or just another thing that could drive Boyd over the edge by the monsters? So who else could be reincarnated? Donna, Kenny, Christy, Elchin, Sarah? Only time will tell with these people and when we find out more about the townspeople of the past, but the only other person I want to bring up right now is Tilly. Tilly immediately stuck out to me because she seemed to adjust to this place rather quickly. She dances in the rain in the first scene that we even see her in, but then she really takes all this information that's given to her at face value. Now, part of this could be that she was old and she just didn't have a lot to live for anymore, especially with her being sick and dying, but that's also not very true because she mentions that she has 7 grandchildren. The number 7 kind of stuck out to me for whatever reason. I didn't really know why that was until I remembered this photo. The number of kids here is 7. I'm not even sure what to make of this connection, if it even is a connection. You never know with this show, but I feel like this could be Tilly remembering a past life as somebody who was trying to protect these 7 kids. I really feel like this will be something like Gravity Falls, where there's a few people who are truly important to the prophecy of the town, and something similar will happen here. There will be maybe like a dozen people who are reincarnated, and everybody else will just be super unlucky. What's up with the faraway trees? The last, major question that I can think of, the rest are all a lot smaller, is of course everything to do with the faraway trees. Now we got something that might be an answer or might not be when we were told that the children put all their hopes and dreams into the roots of the tree, which is the roots that Jade saw in the season 2 finale. Now this could be the faraway tree, or the bottle tree that brought Tabitha to the lighthouse, and if that's the case, then that makes a bit of sense, but what about all the other faraway trees? I think we've personally seen 4 of these faraway trees, but Victor says that there's many of them. We saw the first one that Victor said he didn't know existed, that he threw the rock into. We saw the one that Julie escaped into and it brought her to the bunker. We saw the one that Boyd went into and it took him to Martin. And of course, we saw the bottle tree that took Tabitha to the lighthouse. I might be missing one, but I don't think I am. It's entirely possible that the children made all of these through the use of friendship and magic, but the next question I pose is this. Is there a way to control them? Every time we've seen a main character go through them, it brought them to where they wanted to go, a safer place, or somewhere not so desirable but also relatively safe. Then there was also Dale. But do the bottles have something to do with where they travel? Was Miranda onto something about placing the bottles with different numbers in order to try and calibrate the tree? Is that why she tried to make one in her backyard so she could travel to the town and save the children? The faraway trees and the fact that trees move in general is definitely the most magical thing about this show, other than the town looping them in the first place, and I think whatever the end game plotline is, must involve the trees and being able to use them efficiently. Maybe this can be another way to story walk, or maybe mastering the power of the trees is going to be a way to try and sneak up on the man in yellow or something like that. Now we get into the smaller theories, ones that I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts on, but are definitely strange to me. What's up with the ravens / the crows? So the ravens or crows are obviously a pretty big, symbol for this show, but we don't actually see them all that often, apart from the opening credits. We see them in the first episode when the Matthews family gets stopped by the tree, we see another one dead in the cave, and then another one flies into Colony House. So what's their deal? I think that the birds could either be good or evil. They could be something that the boy in white uses to direct people or to stop them from doing something. Like maybe if anybody went past the tree, they'd just die instantly or something like that, so the crows are warning them to turn around. And when that one flew into Colony House, it was trying to warn Tilly and Fatima not to use the cards. That would explain why there's a dead one on the ground in the cave, because the creatures got their hands on one of the boy in white's messenger birds and they didn't want it to get away. However, most of this stuff can be used vice versa. Maybe they're controlled by the man in yellow when he uses them at the tree as a scare tactic, because maybe if anybody went past the tree, they'd just get out and not have to go into town. Maybe he flew that bird into the tarot reading because it would have given away too many answers to Fatima. This theory kind of works both ways. Where is the motel? This is one I actually have to give my dad credit for pointing out all the way back in the first season. He asked about the sign for the motel, even though there is no motel. I hadn't actually thought about it, but then in season 3, Henry asks the same question, and now that it's been brought up in the show, it's gotta mean something. I mean, was there at one point a motel? Is this sign lying and there never was one? Or is it hidden? The only thing I can really think of with this goes back to my theory on light and dark. If the light can reveal places kept in darkness, then perhaps the torch or some other form of light, like the lighthouse or electricity, will be able to reveal the motel somewhere. But maybe they don't even want to find it. Maybe the motel is what kept the man in yellow at bay, and maybe this will be the mysterious structure that just appears overnight. What other monsters are there? This one goes back to something that Martin said about how the creatures from the town were just the tip of the spear, and we've seen, to some degree, that he's correct. There was whatever the ballerina monster was, the cicadas, which might be the same thing. Then there's this kimono-wearing woman, the man in yellow. So what else is there? Of course, I have to talk about the tree of cobwebs and how there could be some great giant spider out there. Could that be another creature? Will Season 4 never elaborate on any of this and introduce yet another monster? The answer is definitely possible, and I'd even say probable. What dragged the tent? This is definitely giant spider territory, especially since it brought them right to the Tree of Cobwebs. Maybe the giant spider was hunting and looking to add some food to its collection, or maybe this was something else entirely. Why did the house collapse? This one, once again, veers into magic territory, but I think it was because the man in yellow wanted Jim dead, and he hoped that the collapsing house would kill him. Come to think of it, I have no idea why the man in yellow was so offended that Tabitha was digging the hole in the basement. Is it because the cave holds a lot of answers and they would have never found it otherwise? If it is, and the man in yellow collapsed the house, what sort of powers does he have to make it do that? Is he gonna do that to other houses too? Where does the food come from? This is one of those questions that was kind of glossed over in the episode that we saw Boyd's backstory in. He was just completely okay with all of these animals being out in the woods, and no one seemed to ask any questions about it either. I think this is here more so as a sort of practicality and believability for the show. A lot of the viewers would just ask about the food and how they can sustain themselves, so there being animals there just seemed like a convenient way to eliminate that thought. But why are the animals there? Is it some sort of conjuration by either the man in yellow or the boy in white or something else entirely? Or are we just okay with the answer being, yeah, there were a bunch of animals in the woods? Who is Thomas on the phone? Throughout Season 3, both Jim and Ethan are contacted over the phone and the radio by somebody claiming to be Thomas. Personally, I think that this is just something that the creatures figured out how to do. Maybe they were given help to do so, but this just seems like something that the creatures would do and say at night. So personally, I'm okay with this just being chalked up to the creatures did it. Maybe next season, the man in yellow will talk about how he gave the creatures a phone to do this, and that'll be it. But who knows, this could also be something else. This could actually be Thomas. Why don't they just walk to the lighthouse? So this one's a bit obvious, but why not try and go find the lighthouse on foot? We saw that the tree didn't take Dale there, and this kind of seemed to squash any hope of getting there, but nobody else brings up, oh hey, we should just try and find it on foot. I find this especially weird because there's a drawing in Victor's room, which seems to be a map of the entire area, and the lighthouse is literally on this map. So has Victor been there before, and why can't they just try and walk there? Is it too far away for one day's trip and they just would never make it there on time? If so, that's okay, but tell us that. Ethan's story. Right off the bat, I knew that the flight of the Cromonocle and all of Ethan's other stories were going to be really important symbolism in the show going forward. But the real question is, how important is Ethan and his stories to the overall plot? There's already been a lot of symbolism and the stuff he says, like how he calls Julie a storywalker, and then that's exactly what she becomes. But is there more to look into when it comes to all this? Is this really gonna be an Alan Wake situation where the stuff he writes or thinks about ends up coming true? And if that's the case, can Ethan just think up a happy ending for everybody to get out? Is Ethan the true chosen one of this story? I'm not sure, but I'd be willing to bet that Ethan, or Victor, or both of them, are huge keys into solving the overall mystery. So those are all my thoughts and theories of the main questions that I have. Let me know what questions I missed in the comments below, because I'm sure I missed quite a few of them. And also let me know what your theories are and what you thought of my theories. I'm planning on rewatching the show again soon so that I can make a full breakdown video of each season, so subscribe if you want to see that. Special thanks to all my channel members, you guys are the best, and I will see you all in the next one.